And now today you're to imagine that you're in a classroom studying for your PhD. And the year is 2050 AD. And I am Professor Carver, and I'm taking roll call right now. Fortunately, it looks like most of you are here, at least in body. The subject of this class review today is the great lie that paralyzed human evolution. Today we're going to change our perspective drastically, not just by looking back in time, but by just looking and thinking. Now here's an example of a perspective. All right, what is the first number? Well, let me tell you the story of this. This is an actual receipt from the U.S. Post Office. I sent my son a gift, which he did not receive. So I fortunately saved this. And I was going to call the post office and say, where is it? But I looked at those numbers and thought, oh my God, how do I do that? Then I had a girlfriend over that night. We had a glass of wine together and looked at it again. It looked the same. Then after another glass of wine, you have the right viewpoint. And look how clear it is. But that is very much like we do in life. In case I forget anything. Now this is a real example of how your perspective can change everything from one moment to something that makes no sense and is totally wrong to being absolutely right all the time. Now you remember, class, that a few weeks ago I gave a lecture called The Ascension Process. In summary, it described the terrible mistake that our race made thousands of years ago that caused the world terrible suffering. What was that grave mistake? Does anyone remember? Class?
I was out that day.
What?
I was out that day.
Yeah, I noticed you were out a little earlier today. Your eyes just drifted. Well, the big lie. This is the great mistake, the big lie. I'm only human, what can you expect? Now, when you agree that you're only human, what follows from that premise? Think about it. If you're human, what happens? All right, first of all, you can get sick. Humans get sick, we know it. You might get jealous of someone. You might hate someone. I doubt it in this group, but it's possible. And one of the worst things that can happen if you believe you're human, you die. So when you're born, what do you have to look forward to? Death. Eventually, and sometimes quickly. So this is the premise that people believe. And when you believe something, even though it's totally false, you produce the exact effects that this belief implies. You know the law. It's been said many times in different ways. Whatever you sow, you reap. Whatever you plant, you get that. For example, I love the simple ones. One of the things that got me years ago that made me wake up, if you plant a daisy, you can't expect to see a rose. And the law of nature is also the law of mind. If you plant a belief in your mind that you're poor, you harvest poverty. If you believe that you're human and subject to every virus and disease in the world, you are vulnerable because to any disease that comes along. Whether you believe something, whether it's true or false, it will have an effect. Perception is reception. What you perceive is what you receive. And maybe more important, what you believe is what you receive. Jesus said it years ago, be it done unto you according to your faith. Now, our ancestors had no idea that they were powerful creators with these fantastic minds that control things. And so they had no idea that when they believed something, it happened. It was all something, somebody else did it. I blame you. Blame, be lame. Yeah, and that's really true. If you blame other people for the things in your life, it means you haven't discovered yet you are the magnificent creator. Of course, you may not be creating Michelangelo type's work. You may have a terrible painting. But whatever you believe, you're creating. Our race, consequently, because of this, became a race of victims. Now, it's hard for us to believe today. We can't even imagine it, but can you realize that just 30 years ago, people believed they could die? I know it's hard to imagine today, but people used to believe that. And worse than that, 6 centuries before that, they actually believed the world was flat. Now we can laugh now at these poor people that are so ignorant. And we can feel in 2050 AD that we know so much. Yeah. But our ancestors went through hell. Literally, the one they created for themselves, of course, before we found the truth. Do you know, even today, here in 2050 AD, some people stubbornly believe that you can't get to other galaxies through star holes or wormholes. It's hard to believe, I know. Now, our ancestors believed they were human despite the fact that their book, their own recognized book of authority, the Bible, told them clearly they were not human. Now, those of you who had incarnations on earth probably remember the Bible. It was written thousands of years ago in story form because the human race was then mentally immature, which is a very polite way of saying pretty ignorant. Sooner or later, they knew, the writers knew, that someone would come along and begin to understand and unmask the symbols. Now today, class, we're going to review a couple stories. And we're going to do some research and start with Luke 1 in the Old Testament. The New Testament. Now, old Bibles, by the way, are very delicate, so if you're in the library upstairs later researching, please be careful. Now, the first story we're going to examine is the Annunciation. Now, the Bible writer actually painted this picture. Here we have an angel speaking to a virgin named Mary who's engaged to a man named Joseph. And what is he saying? Now, this is from the Bible. I forgot to put the exact reference. She had found favor with God and would bring forth a son to be called Jesus. That's what the angel told her. Now, Mary looked at him and said, "How? How's that possible? I know not man. How can that be?" And the angel said, and listen carefully, "The Holy Ghost shall come upon thee, and the holy thing which shall be born of thee shall be the Son of God." Now, can you imagine, instead of the church and everyone else trying to figure out what this really said, what this impossible analogy really meant. They said, women, you should follow the Virgin Mary as your model. Now, if you are a woman, can you imagine how difficult it is to be a virgin mother? Now, for years, women felt guilty about sex, and the husbands had a problem with that too. So you can see how one thing like that can just change your perspective. Now let's look at the real meaning. An angel. What does an angel represent, class? Class, wake up.
Messenger.
A messenger, yes. From where?
God.
Above, high up above, from the fourth dimension. Now, this represents an idea being implanted into a receptive soul. Why we use a feminine, it's receptive. And Mary symbolizes this soul. Now, Mary had to accept this idea, class. So the writer had her say, "Be it done unto me according to thy word." Because our race could not evolve automatically to the next dimension. We have to choose it. We have to become aware of the truth. We have free will, that's why. Now, Luke probably thought he'd succeeded in making it obvious that this wasn't a literal fact, because even the ignorant people of that day knew that you didn't have babies as a virgin. So, it was announced that this holy thing had no human father, but the Father was God. Now, this analogy was supposed to tell the race what was to happen when the idea was born in their minds of the divinity within themselves. I love this picture. See the cocoon? It's very difficult to see, but you can see the monarch butterfly right through it with his wings folded. Well, the new idea of our divinity is not born overnight. Like the growth of that butterfly or a baby, it takes time before results are visible in our life. And finally, when the babe is born, he's born in a manger. Why? Because a manger is a box for cattle. Because each one of us, when we first get this understanding, have not conquered our animal nature yet. That's still with us. But eventually, as time goes by, men awakened to the truth, or at least some of them did, and realized that they had a divine nature within. They realized that they were really not human beings. They saw that human was a stage in divinity, like a cocoon is for a butterfly. Now, when people discover this truth, that the Christ is within them, that's the door to the next dimension. I used to wonder when Jesus said in the Bible, "I am the door." I thought, he's the door. I am the door. You know, but then you begin to realize as time goes by again that the idea of the Christ within you is the door to the next dimension. The Bible itself then told the life of Christ. It started at age 12 after the birth, with him growing in wisdom and knowledge in the temple. It skips on then for another 21 years till he's 30. And then he's having his public life. He's teaching and doing miracles. But then, what did the church do? Here's the second mistake the church made. I shouldn't say second, one of them. Instead of learning the truth, they dramatized the death of Jesus. They wrote that he died an agonizing death on the cross because he claimed he was God. Unfortunately, the Catholic Church especially became fixated on the idea of death. I'm a former Catholic, a recovering Catholic, so it's not that, and besides, every religion has the truth buried in it, but it's usually buried deeply. And people have to come along and dig it out and find out what it is. So I'm not knocking, well, I am in a way. I'm just showing what was in those days. So even a movie, there was a movie by, what was the man's name that showed the agony and death of Jesus and excruciating? Right. Yeah. So, I mean, he didn't focus on the ascension, but the Bible tried to tell us this. First of all, do you remember where Jesus was when he was crucified? On Golgotha. Golgotha means skull. The place of the skull. Now that was surely a hint to people that what really died lived in Jesus' skull, his mind, his belief in death, based on the idea that he was human. Now the people of that time were supposed to get the deeper meaning and realize that Jesus' crucifixion actually was the death of death itself, because he chose to die to show us that there was nothing but eternal life. And unfortunately, he chose this because at that time, death was normal, quote unquote, and dying on the cross was even a normal thing for criminals. So this was not a unique thing. What did make it unique was that he chose to do it, to exemplify something to us, to show us. And what was it? The resurrection. I don't have a picture of it. I thought I did. Who knows what'll come up? Yes. Okay. The resurrection, the transfiguration, the ascension. That should have been the focus. These three events show the divine being within rose out of the body of dead beliefs. Now notice this picture. It was painted during medieval times, but the artist must have been illumined. Where does he show Jesus? Right in front of a star gate. It wasn't until the 21st century that NASA found out that magnetic poles connected galaxies. Now, paintings of his transfiguration always show Jesus with plenty of light, if you notice. He's always wearing white, and there's always light coming from him. And the Bible refers to Christ's glory, glow. He glows. And he became a glowing light body and rose above the gravity of earth. And remember, people always who are smart are called what? Bright, illumined, brilliant, enlightened. So light. And what did God say when he created the world in Genesis 1? Yeah, he didn't say, let there be matter. He said, let there be light. What's the conclusion to this? Our whole race knows that the truth can set us free from pain in 2050 AD. We know the truth. And the old Bible promised this 2,000 years ago, but hardly anybody got it. There was a religion called Unity, and they did have an affirmation that said, there is only one presence and one power active in the universe in my life, God. I wish they'd added, and there's only one manifestation, God wearing form. Oh, I have another slide. Now, I want you to write the following information down in your notebooks. The last review before your final exams is a class on tapping at my house, Monday evenings, 8, 15, and 23. From 6:30, I have to 8, but it's probably 6:30 to 7:30 unless we're all fascinated. The sign-up sheet is in the back, and this is one of the marvelous techniques that allowed our forefathers to actually root out the subconscious beliefs in their minds that created all the problems they experienced. And you will get credit for this class, so you better show up. Thank God we were born knowing the truth, that we were divine and that heaven was our real home. Now, good luck, class. I know you'll pass the test next week, and I'll see you at the tapping review class in 2 weeks. Don't be late.